This was a tough talk to get together because most of us that are in the School of Medicine, I was telling Carly, is, you kind of get into this mode of you're just presenting facts and some kind of knowledge base. For me, it's some medical students who have desire to do musculoskeletal medicine, and then the preponderance of it is, folks who, okay, I'm supposed to stay close to the speaker over here, just who, do a residency in orthopedic surgery, and then, maybe some interactions with other learners that kind of come to the service. So it's a privilege to present this. And I think the gist of this, for me at least, was supposed to give a little bit of a surgeon's perspective on some of the challenges facing, whether you're in medical school or whether you're finished and you're practicing. So I'll try to do some of that. So my love is certainly orthopedic surgery, orthopedic oncology. It's a little bit of, probably, it doesn't sound diverse, but it's quite diverse. And then I throw in a lot of other general orthopedic surgery because I did a lot of that before I entered this field. So everything's pretty much fair game except for computer science.
Yeah. Really fast. And you can step over there too. The mic will pick up pretty much anything.
Okay, there it is.
Perfect.
So I want to get back to the purpose of this and finding inspiration, resilience in medicine, and shaping the culture. And then talk a little bit about, at least from my perspective, how I've sort of dealt with stress and saw this as sort of maintaining or keeping joy going forward. It's been here 22 years, and I was, I'm dating myself now, but I was a medical school graduate in 1984, not from this institution, but from somewhere else, and I did a fellowship in Chicago. Along the way, I served in the Air Force. So it's been a bit of a life of service, and I think that might be a little bit of a central theme for me as I plodded through this career. So I don't want to pretend that we're going to take away the stressors. There are always going to be those, whether you're in surgery or primary care or any other field of medicine, and certainly you're feeling a lot of that right now in school. So I hope that what I can show might talk a little bit on how to combat those. And, I think probably universally, most of the folks in this room went into medicine because they just had a general desire to help people. And if you don't have a little bit of that in your fabric, you might question why you're doing it. Because I think that's going to hold true through this experience in medical school and through a career in medicine. So this is my perspective, and I loaded up slides pretty much going along an orthopedic surgery theme. And just so you'll know, in case you've had sort of thoughts about staying as far away from surgery, especially surgery of bones, as you can, we do take care of patients with diseases and conditions of the extremities, including the spine. And sometimes that's non-operative and sometimes that's surgical. And most of you guys probably know us because we got the shortest H&P ever. There are benefits to orthopedic surgery. And I'll throw in a little funny that probably more real than you think. We're not the people to ask to lead the code if it happens. So, and so there's been a lot of emphasis on physician wellness. And in my role right now as the chair of the department is pretty sensitive to this, as it is for the School of Medicine, is for the healthcare system. Because we know that when we maintain physician wellness, we improve the quality of care that's delivered, and certainly job satisfaction is much higher, and your quality of life overall is much better. So there's a lot that's sort of rolled into that right now, and every year I can tell you, as a member of this organization, we'll get a survey and ask us how we're doing, and we mark and check and go down the line, and we get some feedback on that. And for me, I get feedback from what the response has been for all of my faculty, so I can kind of help zero in on really areas of concern, those faculty members that are really experiencing some really burnout things. So I think I was chosen to do this mostly because Carly was on the committee, and then secondly, surgeons do have a fairly high stress level, and I think a lot of studies kind of show that. We're on the right side there in case you missed it. So if you look at burnout in medicine, again, lots of attention given to this. And I don't know that, even though we have maybe some suggestive coping mechanisms, we don't have our minds wrapped around this completely yet. I can tell you that at some point, predictably, most people in this room will have a time in their, whether it's in medical school or it's going forward, starting your practice or deep into your practice, you'll get to a point where you're feeling pretty stressed. And I think you got to hang on to a few principles. And I think hopefully I can show you a few of the things that I think are important as you, no matter what time of your career path you are. You know, I'm getting a little bit toward the end of mine, but I think they still hold true. So if you go back to this burnout definition, you might have heard this previously through conversation today, but it's a syndrome in response to interpersonal stressors on the job. So if you, and we all have stressors. We'll have days where days are bad. And we're not talking about that. We're talking about chronic emotional exhaustion, feelings of cynicism, detachment, sense of ineffectiveness. You go home and continually, day by day, you feel yourself on a slippery slope and you're going the wrong way. And, you know, you kind of get a sense of like, why am I doing this? Because what have I accomplished? That, you know, you'll bump into some of that. If it's a day-to-day thing, if it's 5 minutes, if it's just maybe an hour, you might find that it's a little easier to get over that. But if you slip into this pattern of it happening continually, day after day, you probably need to think about getting some help. So here's the contributors, and I think surgery's no exception to this. There are long hours, and that runs into a lot of physical and emotional exhaustion. You know, it impacts your family life, whether you're married or single or have a significant other. There's a lot of paperwork. I can tell you, I witnessed the evolution of cutting down more and more trees, and now, you know, more and more digital files getting bigger and bigger to house information. And the laws and the rules that are out there now for us to practice have become quite cumbersome. So you're getting into it. I don't see it right now as it's getting much easier, certainly as we get into the electronic medical record business, but there's a lot of that. And you know, there's only so much time in your day where you have to interface with a patient. And then some of that time you have to record something on paper the right way. So, and then, you know, there's the discussion about insufficient income. I don't know that anybody in this room, if they're practicing medicine in most places in the United States, are going to starve. But, you know, the realities are, and some of you guys are facing it, I'm totally sensitive to that medical school is expensive and there are a lot of loans. You know, and I think they heard the statistic that the loan average for when completing medical school is somewhere on the order of $200,000 to $300,000. That's a lot. I mean, it's like just you're finishing school and you got a mortgage. It's a big one. And some of the requirements for start paying up on that's pretty fast. And here you are looking at a residency. Well, the salary's not great in residency. So I'm not as pessimistic like this all the time. I'll kind of pick it up something, but those are realities. And then, you know, there are the increased financial burdens, you know, so I'll keep going on here because I think there may be some understanding of kind of how you deal with some of this stuff. So here's some of the consequences. Your quality of life goes down. Importantly, your ability to take care of patients the right way goes down. And you just have this overall sense of loss of accomplishment. You lose sort of sight of why you went into this to begin with, the purpose for being in medicine. So, by the way, if you see in these slides with a stethoscope around the neck, that's not an orthopedic surgeon. So, how do you cope with stress? So you can go on the web and you can find all kinds of help sites with this, and you know, I think all of them just have a little bit of a general theme, and there are ways you probably shouldn't. Certainly, keeping things to yourself, being non-relational, wrong idea. You know, you need help. You need friends. You need family. You need a lot of people to look to. You need a mentor. You know, medicine is a really, really tough career to go into and try to do it on your own. It'll lead to problems. So you can't just go on like nothing's happening. So you got to speak up and speak out. So there's an alarming number of physicians, certainly surgeons, that are hanging it up because of the problem we have of burnout. So, but I want to call you back to this. You know, if you, before you applied to medical school, or even way before that, even high school, if your sense was that medicine is the, it's for you. You couldn't imagine doing anything else. Well, maybe that's a little bit of a calling, and you kind of have to hold on to that in times of thick or thin. So remember that one. I'm going to come back to it. So how do you find inspiration in medicine? Now, this is not it's not a talk about the programs that are out there, and there are numerous to find help with stressors, find inspiration support. You got to find help, and I put in medicine because I think there are things in medicine that can help this picture, ironically. So before I do that, I need to show you a little bit of kind of what I do, and I figure I'd put some of these in here because it's mid-afternoon, and I'll show you a few of these slides. So this is my practice. Orthopedic oncology it's a practice of orthopedic surgery, but it takes care of lumps and bumps and tumors and cancer and benign things, extremities, spine, really sort of the whole gamut of that. And I chose that for a lot of different reasons. I knew that I wanted to go down the surgery path before I started medical school. I don't like this in personal testimony, but, and my mom died of cancer. I had friends and family who had a lot of orthopedic issues because of their behavior. But all those things to me fit going down that path. My upbringing was a lot of sort of constructive building kind of things. I mean, all that just fit. And then for me personally, orthopedic oncology left me a little bit of an idea that I could interact with a lot of other services. And that may be a little bit of touching on the theme of being relational. It's not just with your friends and family, it's with your colleagues. So that keeps me going. It keeps me going through this. There are oftentimes patients who don't survive their disease. I'm happy to see Carly is like with us because she's a bright star in this picture. But the reality is, cancer is bad, and people don't survive that. So there is, and oftentimes I'll get asked, doesn't that weigh heavily on you? At times it does. But I sort of think of this as there are wins in this, and certainly there are a lot of people that survive the right treatment for cancer, and certainly the surgery that's done for it, that may be done the right way, can add to some of that big picture thing. So bottom line is, this is a bit of a team effort. If you're wondering kind of how you get there, well, it's 4 years of medical school, residency is 5 years, and then 1 to 2 years of fellowship. So the limb cancer treatment generally involves medical oncologists, pathologists, and a whole litany of, and I'll give you a list here in a second, but my practice specifically is taking out something in a bone. It could be cancer, it could be something else, and maybe replacing it with something. It could be an allograft or it could be metal. And I would be remiss if I didn't at least give you some working list of the people that I bump into every day. And the surgeon, some surgeons with their name at the very top here. All these people on here are important, and I don't think you'd have a win if you didn't have all those people working together. So there are options to treat extremity tumors depending upon what it is. There are those who have, unfortunately, metastatic cancer from some source. It might go to a bone, it might weaken a bone, and for that, oftentimes we can jump in and help with fixation, make the quality of life better. It's not curative, but there are others, and Carly mentioned osteosarcoma, that is potentially curative by removing a tumor like that. And then you can go on down the line there, and you see that amputation is among this, but that tends to come up a lot less nowadays in current medicine. So here's my graphic slide morning. You guys are medical students, so you've seen worse, I think, at this point. So here's just an example of somebody who's coming in the door, had broken their arm, minimal trauma, and this is their first recognition that something bad's in their arm and it's metastatic cancer. So we can do things like putting a rod in the humerus, and their pain is instantly better. They get up, they function, they kind of go on, and it's not curative, but at least can improve their lifestyle. That's a little bit of a sense of satisfaction. Satisfaction in the work you're doing, that you're helping that person move along. They're so grateful, and a grateful patient makes me grateful I'm in this profession. Here's an example of a patient with osteosarcoma, distal femur. You can see some of the stuff going on down here. And there's a large mass. And I can tell you our job in this case, and most of these patients, is to remove this. It's not small surgery when you get into things like this. But when it's all said and done, if you've taken a tumor out like that and you put something in like this, and the patient is functional and living their life, and ultimately your hope is to be cured of a very bad cancer, then that brings you a whole lot of job satisfaction. And it certainly opens up a relationship long-term with the patient. So metastatic disease, again, you're not going to cure it, but you're going to make life much better for some of these patients. And that, and working with patients with primary cancer and being a part of a team that can be curative for these people, that's a big driver for me. So here's another example. Even a younger patient with a cancer, it causes all kinds of problems to try to restore these things, but you can do it, and it's a growing implant. I'm going to keep going here. When patients get even smaller, younger, and the bone looks extremely small like this, you can say, well, wow, how are you going to replace that? And so this is going to be a person that's going to grow up to be an adult, and whatever you put in there, is it going to match? Is it going to grow with the patient? But we have kind of tricks that we've experienced over years to kind of help fix that. And then, of course, cancer affects the very young. This profession involves patients of all ages, you name it, babies, 90-year-olds. So the lumps and bumps in cancer, it affects every age. And so if it's something in the limb, that's something that we kind of jump into. And that, again, that's another point of my satisfaction. I'm not narrowly focused. I like to treat the entire population. So you get to know those patients when they grow up, you get to know their families. It's all good stuff. So I'm kind of building in my motivation as I go through this, and you might be able to sense my excitement for all this stuff. But, and then there are times when you do the crazy nutty things, like a rotation plasty. It's an old procedure where you essentially have to take out something in a femur, and in an effort to sort of shorten what would have been a really high amputation, you close the gap by bringing their tibia up to their femur and turning their foot around to serve as a knee. I can tell you, I've had lots of those patients in that situation. Starts out like this, bad cancer in the end of the bone. You take it out. The only thing that you see in the bottom there is nerves and blood vessels, and then you close the gap, bring in the tibia to the femur, and you can use a plate, and it looks like this. Now, the patient's not laying prone on the operating table. The patient's supine. So, but that foot and ankle serves as a knee. Now, those patients are incredibly happy with this. In fact, that patient went on 7 years later to be in the Paralympic Games. So then there are other indications, and this practice allows me to jump into some patient care. I think is a little bit of even more salvage when they've had things done already, things done elsewhere potentially. Infected prosthetic, the guy comes in, he's 19 years old and says, I want an amputation. And then we kind of went down that same path. He's 19 years old, and we put this on, and it all heals, and he looks like that. And this is a photo he sent after he left the area, went to New Zealand. That's his girlfriend. And he's being pretty nonchalant there with a bag of chips or something before he goes hang gliding. So job satisfaction for me. So, I can kind of keep going with this. We have weird tricks that we can even lengthen amputations. Bad problem with this patient's infected implant. And this is an operation basically to try to transport the tibia up to the femur and lengthen. And so these patients can have a bit more meaningful life when it comes to an amputation. There she is fitted with her socket, and she's walking down the hall with it now. And then I'm going to extrapolate. From time to time, I'll take a call at a children's hospital here, and this is a 3-year-old that came in, and I just happened to be on call. And there's a lawnmower injury, and it looks like a fairly mangled extremity, and nerves intact, blood vessels out, so that gets repaired. And my plastic surgeon colleague said, "How you gonna? What are you gonna do with this? This is going to be." So you start cleaning things up, put an external fixator on it, and then you kind of borrow on some of the tumor things I just showed you to turn the foot around backwards. And this kid came in about 3 months or so ago. He's younger here. Came back in using his foot and ankle as a knee, and essentially being fit with a prosthetic. So he's like running around out there. He's an Amish kid, so he's got a lot of work to do. So that, let's see if I can make this thing work. Yeah. So how do you find joy in medicine? I think you got to find purpose. So again, there are a lot of things I think you've heard it, other conferences, other talks today. There are ways that you can, look for other help things. But if you're going to find it in medicine, if you're going to find it in the thing that you're going to be in, I think first of all, you got to remember why you're in it. You chose medicine because you felt that you're going to be service oriented and you're going to help patients. So that's my purpose right now. Those things you just saw. You cultivate relationships now, and those are with families and with the teams that's around you. It could be your medical student, friends, your colleagues. So, and you got to remember to kind of keep maybe a sense of gratitude. There are a lot of people out there that want to go to medical school, whether or not they've had the right motivations, not known, but as you know, you're the fortunate ones. You got in, yeah, you got in. Now you're looking at step one, step two, and the stresses are building. It never stops. But you still got to be grateful because practicing medicine is a privilege. And I just added this last one here because I was totally remiss that I didn't add. You need to find a mentor. Now a mentor could be just about anybody. It could be a family member. But if you're in the field of medicine, you kind of have a sense as to maybe what things appeal to you and what doesn't. If you're interested in primary care, if you're in pathology, if you're interested in surgery, you might have found somebody that seems to fit maybe some of your personality or your way of doing things. But I don't think anybody can just insert, and that's the fallacy of what goes on nowadays. I hear it all the time. You need to find so-and-so a mentor. It's hard for me to find a mentor for somebody. You do a better job of that, just looking around and being kind of sensitive to those people working around you and just knowing who that person is. And most people will say, yeah, I'm happy to help you. So we're in a very relational business. So patients, yeah, you build relationships. I went to Carly's 16th birthday.
16th birthday party. He lives in company.
The healthcare team, they're people that you get to know well, and you'll work with them, and you have to find value in them. You have to support them. They'll have tough times too. And you want to invest in the lives of your patients. And I kind of like this: good physician treats the disease, the great physician treats the patient who has the disease. So you don't want to be so narrowly focused. I give some of my colleagues a hard time because I think they'll put a blinder on and they'll see a problem and they'll forget anything about the patient. They won't ask anything about the patient. I think you need to know. Sometimes I think it's kind of hard to treat the disease or treat the specific problem if you don't know, what's next. Do you need to do something to fix this when a patient really doesn't have any concern about fixing this? There are other things going on in their lives. So, and I still hold these. You can't be everywhere at once. So you'll find this out more and more. So you can't be super person. I can't say Superman, it's not politically correct. Superwoman, you can't be super person. You can't possibly know it all. I mean, there's more out there now than ever was. I don't know how you guys do it. 1984, I graduated, and then I just can't imagine how much information has ballooned since that time. And you can't fix it all. I put a bunch of pictures up here of patients and struggles and issues that are pretty complicated, but sometimes you can't be MacGyver for everything. But I think in those instances, I think you have to have somebody you could share this with. And it might be that person says, yeah, you're right, this is not fixable. But at least you have the solace of communicating with somebody and they back you up with this. And sometimes if it's a colleague, that person can even help you with a patient to explain this may not be a fixable problem. So don't do it on your own. And pull this out. It's a bit complicated, but I can boil it down. It's, well, I mean, you can read it. I think you have to invest in relationships, and I think really the throwback here is just remember why you got into this. This is a service-oriented profession. And as part of that service, I think you have to find your purpose as being a servant. So I don't see it any other way. The days of just jumping into medicine, I can go to law and do this, maybe make money, but just to jump into medicine and think it's a great profession that's just going to make me money, you're barking the wrong tree. I think you really have to have a heart for this. So, okay. And I think if you do, you'll get through tough times. So. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any specific questions? Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I think your work is amazing. That's really important and meaningful, and I can tell by the way you talk about it that you love what you do. That's, unfortunately, I think it's unique. My question is, obviously you have some very tangible outcomes to derive joy and meaning from, arguably, right? Do you find it's been more difficult for you to find that joy and passion when you have maybe less tangible goals in mind? Or is it for somebody in primary care, non-primary care?
Yeah. You know, and in no way do I want to take away from primary care or any other field in medicine. It's a little bit of a big picture thing for me. You know, there are some areas of surgery where your interaction with patients is much less. It might be trauma surgery, you know, and they're in no position to speak with you when they're in ED, especially if they got really bad things going on. Or there are areas of surgery where there might be one clinic day out of the entire week, and the rest of the time you're in the operating room and you're not conversing with the patient then. I'm a little bit more of a big picture person, and I think I like different aspects of all this. You know, it's not all just the surgery part. What I didn't show you is, you know, the interaction in clinic. Carly's been there numerous times, and you know, you just catch up on patients. You learn more about them. I think they help you grow. Yeah, I mean, this field is a little bit specialized, but it's sometimes it's the small things too that matter to me. So it's a spectrum. Anybody else? Anybody want to go to surgery? Yeah. Right. It's scary.
I was going to ask you, sorry, question too. How did you know this is what you wanted to do when you were in medical school? Or how did you get to that point?
Well, I'll tell you, there are some decision times, clearly, and you're facing those now. I mean, how many's taken step one already? Yeah. And step two, step one and step two. Yeah. I mean, there's a reality of life. And you nowadays, especially when everything's online, you can go and you can look at sites and figure out, am I competitive to go in these things? And if there's a concern about that, you know, and I've had several people, you know, talk with me and talk with my program director and say, what are my what are my chances? Am I competitive enough to do this? And I think we have to be honest, you know, because it is really a competitive field. A number of fields are competitive these days. You know, this might be the wrong answer for you, but you know what? If you're determined, I mean, I grew this in high school. I knew I wanted to be in medicine in high school, and I knew I wanted to be a surgeon in high school. I don't think that's the case with everybody. Everybody's circumstance is much different. But for me, I can't give you a straight answer. I just knew it. You know, there's nothing else that appealed to me. And I think if I didn't have that kind of desire, you know, I probably wouldn't be happy where I am right now. So, you know, I think there's sometimes there are life events that happen even for some folks. You know, you might, you might be an adult, even an older adult, and you've been down a path and tried too many things, and then boom, it's like, wow, I found it. So it's hard to explain that one. You know, it's an excellent question. How do you know? You know, some people try something else pretty frequently. I've got a son that's like that. You know, you try something else and you realize this stinks. I want to do something different. So sometimes when a little bit older, you get more focused, I think.
So I know you, so like I know your family, and I know what a great like family man and everything you are. But kind of talk about your hours and how you balance owning a farm and having a family. And
I mentioned the farm. It takes an understanding family, there's no question about it. You know, it used to, and I knew that I wanted to go in sort of academic medicine. It's changed. So back in the day when you choose academics, you think, well, you know, there's going to be a little bit slower pace. You're going to be interacting a little bit more. The education is going to take you away from some of the clinical stuff. And just overall, that pace was going to be a lot easier for a lifestyle. I think it's flipped around the other way now. So I'm not trying to talk you out of academic medicine, by the way. But it is is it takes a really an understanding family, and I think also you can be so entrenched and so liking what you do. For me, it's not. I got to crank out as many cases as I can in a day because it pays me more. And sometimes I get caught into that treadmill of doing as much as I can just because I just like it. I like the end result. I like the patient's smile on their face. I like everything about all that stuff. And I'll forget time, and you can look at your watch, it's 8 p.m. and realize, boy, I wonder what everybody's doing back at home if they'll miss me. It's cold dinner. I really do think you have to put safeguards down. And I think the outside of work safeguards, you're doing things that are healthy for you, exercise, if you're spiritual, you follow I think you have to, literally sometimes, you have to, on a calendar, and you have to have somebody who's going to hold you accountable. If it's a spouse or child, whoever, put those things on a calendar so that they can remind you, hey, you committed to this. You need to be home because we have this thing we're going to tonight. So, because you'll lose yourself in it and you'll become a real workaholic. So, and then there's the farm. Actually, the farm's actually a little bit more of a release now because I like to drive tractors and do a bunch of stuff on the weekend. So, so that actually helped. That may be one of those outside coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
So I get mad at something and bump it with a tractor or something.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So given your position, kind of doing the department head thing, you've got a lot of people in the department. You've got personalities that I think are just very easy to work with. You've got some difficult personalities.
You know too much about us.
Some people, I'm going to the general surgery, so I've seen a lot. Some people, they agree with what you say. They see this as a servant opportunity, and they see themselves as someone who is there primarily because they know the lives of others. There are other people that see it very much from a consumeristic standpoint what the job can give to them. What do you do to try to change the culture, especially given some people don't necessarily jump along with kind of what you're
So you're
pushing?
talking about one of the biggest battles I have right now, because we're a department. When I started, we had 12, and now we've got 32, and we're hiring. Probably in 3 years we'll have close to 50. And I can tell you, some of the most extreme personalities sometimes come with surgeons. I think you have to spend time with every person. It takes more time, takes away from everything else. But I think you have to be really consistent. I think honest, transparent, consistent. It's a little easier for me now because I'm looking older, and usually that older person tends to get a little bit more opportunity to talk like a dad. But I think you got to be really consistent in the way you act. You can't be all over the map. As soon as somebody sees you as waffling, making exceptions for one person and not the other, you'll lose that one. And it is a big shift. And you got to keep, as a leader, you got to keep your sense of where you want to be. And every little opportunity will be a some gain in the right direction. So those personality things are really tough sometimes. And sometimes you have to sit down and just have a really hard talk. And sometimes it's good too. A lot of times it's good because you can figure out there are other things going on in that person's life.
Mhm.
Or they may have a background that you're not aware of that sort of made them like that. So I can't say that I have been a lot of difficult personalities, but I can't say that I've had such a terrible personality with any one person that I couldn't sit down and reason with them, or at least gain their trust and sort of slowly start heading down the right path.
I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
So, because you haven't always been the leader, have you ever been in a situation where the leader did waffle and like you didn't feel like you respected them, and then how did you respond, or how did you gain their trust as like?
It's probably some of the same answer. You want to be consistent, and I think if you're consistent and sort of within the norm of what you know is right and what society tells you is right, then sooner or later that leader will figure out that decision. You need to change things a bit. That's the other problem. You get their frustrations being a department chair or somebody in some leadership thing. These personalities that are sometimes pretty extreme. being a junior faculty person or being somebody in non-leadership, like you sort of live all those years, it takes a tremendous amount of patience, self-control. I mean, everybody sort of runs into medicine thinking, you know, this is my job. I'm going to really make an impact. And you're eager and you're energetic and you're going. You want to pause a bit, you know, and I'll tell you, one of the worst things for some of that behavior reflective with communication or emails, you know, you think you kind of save stuff, those things in a word, you know, kind of zipping along. I've learned probably more, even in this job, that if I'm a little irritated with somebody, that's not the time to send out a scathing email. You know, you probably need to think about it a little bit, because that really puts you in a limelight of being as irrational and that waffly as maybe they are. You gotta discern. I mean, it just takes a lot of thought and wisdom and before you kind of put things down. And I'll tell you, there's almost never an indication that you have to be so egregious that you're insulting somebody, either verbally or email. It just that will come back to haunt you. So. Anything else I can help you with?
5 minutes if anybody has any questions.
Anybody feeling stressed? No, not too bad yet. Yeah. I will say this, you know, not enough coverage. We're trying to do this now with our residents. Show them a little bit more of the business side of things, because that's a whole nother animal. And when you get out of medical school and get into a practice, you try to figure out some of the business side of stuff, and it's getting more and more difficult. And I don't know what it is for physicians broadly, but I'll tell you that over 50% of orthopedic surgeons, when they finish and they get a job, will be moving in a year or two. It's that high. So you really want to be armed with as much information about the business side of things as you can. And even then, you know, it might change that statistic a little bit, but there are so many models of healthcare right now, and it seems like the pressures are upon because of the high overhead of taking care of all the paperwork, the dealing with the insurance companies and so forth, that you have to hire more and more people to do that. It's almost just not sustainable for a private practice these days. So unless it's a big practice, so it gets a little tough. And you know, I think you have to have a little bit of an idea of kind of models that you want to get into, and then look at the disadvantages for big practices. Even, you know, a multi-specialty group like I'm in, you lose a lot of governance. You know, your say-so is kind of your ability to change things sometimes a little more difficult. You have these things called administrators, and sometimes their perception of medicine is a little different than yours. So, but more and more, I think medical schools probably, and might be the case now. There might be other courses that sort of give you an idea of kind of what you're getting into, because you see, you know, when you finish school, you know, then you'll start residency. It's not that far off. I mean, it probably seemed like yesterday you started medical school. You're over halfway through it. Time rolls on pretty fast, so being educated in all the facets of medicine can be very helpful. Anything else? Anybody would be an orthopedic surgeon now?
I think the front row people.
Front row people.
Well, okay, aside from me, I already tried that once. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you guys for seeing me.
Thank you.
Dr. Wurtz, did you know Kaz case?
Yeah, I did very well.
I rotated with him last month. Yeah, I fell in love with him.
So he's a little bit.
Yeah. Riley and then
Friday.
Yeah, so I gotta be ready for
yeah,
Yes,
last month with them.
Oh, yeah.
I love you guys.
Okay. I remember him actually, yeah.
It's interesting.
Seeing the other guy. Like, yeah.
I got a shot, but it's still so
I remember him. The races that he used. We were able to get this guy. But
He was the first guy that inspired me to
really.
yeah, which is
build what you want to.
question, how do you know? Because Plan B is not good. Plan A is you need to have some kind of. It's interesting.
Yes, oh, yeah, yeah.
PO is like it's more airway programs, not plan couples matching. So, really, I won't monopolize your time, but just
I wouldn't class because I talked to a student there. I stopped teaching at 17. And then
They were applying for They were applying for
what's the last?
Hey, this is all. Okay.
Yeah, he's what you're
I was trying to figure out whether or not it was. And it wasn't. But trying to figure out whether it's
how's your son like it?
for sure. I mean,
Okay.
they just started like 6 years ago. I've got someone last time.
Yeah, like, my own after grade.
Yes.
I've actually been
Why
Doesn't mean that much, except for the fact that you're getting slightly more
there's so many
it has been a program to get out enough people. Oh, yeah, okay. That existed.
I thought it was pretty crazy. Did you hear that? You already heard about it?
I heard that in the grapevine. I mean,
To be fair,
I noticed
it sounds like it's
that's all I was trying I use surgery as one of the biggest in the country.
teaching.
missing out.
Yes. I miss the students. That's the one thing I miss. I don't miss the I don't miss cameras. Actually,
Because I students of the fact that 400 years ago, they took 6 years. We're going to find this. They have
they could have had
Purdue doesn't have
you know, just
There's an IU school. Yeah, right. They don't have their own.
They're doing it. Like, it's like really hard.
Because you need a pretty well establishment school. With a few exceptions, some of these very accessible students.
And if you don't have students out there doing something, but they don't get it.
Yeah.
They can't actually teach it. So it's like this catch-22. You get someone who's willing to stay. You need some So, yeah.
Essentially, I mean, it wasn't like a mandate, but they were afraid of LCME coming back in and saying, hey,
until I switched.
essentially,
Like, open
they
his
said,
eyes a bit,
we
you
would
know?
consider accrediting
Hey, how are you? Good. Nothing, studying, that's all. No, thanks for your talk. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's good.
So the first 2 years.
No, he's
Out of 360.
yeah. And the new curriculum came through.
Yeah, no, I don't.
It's all good. I think you send them off together.
Everything good? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just taking, I got step 1 in June. So I'm hoping to score really well on that.
There's
You
years.
know, I'm looking to go in the field.
Great. And they did it.
We end
They made it
26th.
petition.
If I,
Everyone.
so we got about 5 or 6 weeks depending on when you decide to. So we had to take it before the first. There's multiple options. They kind of let you pick and decide. They do run a kind of like a high frequency, high Q a little bit at the end. There's options. So we kind of
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
so that's about the only thing right now. So,
Yeah, I remember.
yeah.
I was one of those. So my class was supposed to win 16. I think it should
I
be
didn't
now.
know rotation.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like something like if they want some people. Our last day of class has a 14.
No.
Like the last lecture before everyone to dedicate time for study.
Oh, that's close, that's every technology.
So you're gonna do
Oh, yeah, it's time to get that. So, awesome. It's great to see you. Yeah, thanks for the talk. I appreciate it. Okay, thank you very much.
Everyone just. So the time that the college professors started walking down to the lecture, people disappeared.
Our problem with math is they have
Where?
it's like
Where?
an extra technology to teach us, and we're like, these do 300 slides in 50 minutes. Like, give me like, I just started. Give me like an. I
Hey.
just started.
Thank
Well,
you so much.
how'd it go?
Great.
He knows what it's like.
Yeah, it was great. I thought it was perfect. Because I wasn't really sure a lot, because I was involved last year, so I was like, I'm not really sure what the topics are either, but no, I think maybe.
Yeah, it's back in that.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah, we actually had a.
I thought it was.
certainly don't want to be insensitive to those folks, especially discussion members here that's got to be on before. Patients or physicians, practitioners have other questions as well. So, and I probably should acknowledge there sometimes is a need to get precedents and things, but I think much of the frustration and certainly the burnout issues that are facing us right now are really self-induced, and not realizing kind of why you're doing this.
Right,
So,
right. No,
that came
yeah.
off okay.
No, it definitely did. I thought it was in that, so I
Well-
really appreciate you taking the time to come on.
Well, thank you. So this is a day off for you guys?
Yeah, sort of. We had classes in the morning, and then IU students didn't get off. But married students, we usually have lab in the afternoon, like OPP or like osteopathic manual part. So they let us off for lab, which was, yeah, I was like, I'll take that. So, but yeah, I was glad. I'm glad to be a part of it, because I do think that like it's a huge discussion, and I'm kind of with you where like I know a lot of it is like definitely what you're thinking and like your thought process behind it. But because it's a huge discussion in society, I'm like, you know what? Let's like figure out how, if, when we can help people. And, like,
Well, you're right. And you know, the suicide rate is high, and so many people have gone down that path. I mean, this past year, there was a 4th-year student that committed suicide, and he was actually on his interviews.
whoa,
Yeah, like
that's crazy.
It's hard to know. I don't profess to have all the answers on that, but it's certainly important for those around. If you have building relationships and having people that see you, know you,
Yeah, that's
sort of
right.
observe you from day to day, to notice that you're acting funny, different.
Yeah,
How the hell do you know?
yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, a lady talked to me before the suicide. It was like out of the blue.
Which is so
Married for
strange.
40 years, and it just
And then
happened.
all of a sudden,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, well, and that's why, that's like really the main reason why I thought it would be great to hear from you, because I do feel like you're very consistent in your interactions with just not only patients, but with your wife and with your family, and you have such a strong family that like, if anything, like you had something to be able to teach this next generation of people coming in of like, okay, how do you stay afloat like all these years? Like, what do you do? And so I definitely appreciate you coming in and just sharing your time and your wisdom from like all the years.
Take care of yourself.
I will. Are you walking out this way? I was excited to walk with you. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, Nancy, but my grandfather passed away earlier this year.
she